Break the chains of your past. Welcome to your triumphant recovery. This is Wagz Creations.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Addiction and Recovery, brought to you by Wagz Creations. This episode is going to be just kind of touching basis of where I'm at right now in my recovery and kind of what's going on in my life. Obviously things are great. I just reached my 6-month milestone, so things are pretty amazing. Doing amazing at work, and I have a really, really good job. Let's put these things in perspective real quick. So 7 months ago, I was on the streets in Fresno, addicted to fentanyl, pretty much ready to throw in the towel. I didn't care if I died or not or lived. I wasn't trying to die, but at the same time, I could care less if I went to sleep and didn't wake up. That's just the kind of headspace that I was in at the time. But I made it back out here to LA. Decided to make the change, and and just really took this program seriously. I knew I was done with that old life. I did not want that anymore. I have a daughter to think about. And so I really had to dig down deep and think about what I really wanted out of life, and do the necessary changes and take the steps that I needed to take to change that, So I did, even as comfortable as it felt in the beginning, it was really tough. There were times where I wanted to give up, even recently, some things happened, which I'll touch on a little bit. But, I just kept pushing, and I got used to that feeling of being uncomfortable. I got comfortable being uncomfortable, they say. It's kind of cliche, but it's true. I had a home group that I immediately had found, I think, my 5th day sober. And I eventually got into service when I had enough time under my belt. And that meeting has saved my life. It really has, single-handedly. That people in that group became my family. And like I said, there's been times where I've struggled and I wanted to give up on myself and throw everything in the air and just say, fuck it, and these people didn't give up on me. Even when I wanted to give up on myself, they believed in me. They kept pushing me, holding me accountable, and it was an amazing feeling, even though I didn't want it at the time when I was struggling, but, I'm so grateful for that, because of them, I was able to pull through. I didn't use even as much even as bad as I wanted to, and, what had happened was, like I said, I was coming up on 6 months and, I just started my new job. It was very demanding hours. I'm working 13.5-hour days, 16 really for me, because it takes me 3 hours to get to and from work. So it was just really long days. I went from not doing anything all day except for a little bit of schoolwork and doing, these videos and things, and to working 13.5-hour days plus school, and also I found out that, the sober living I'm at is going to be shutting down, and I also went through some other personal things in my life that kind of caught me off guard. And so my emotional state got really heightened, and I wasn't used to dealing with those emotions all at once, and everything just kind of became overwhelming. And I got into that fuck it mode. My addict mind kicked back in. And even though I had almost 6 months under my belt, and I was feeling so good about my life one moment, and then just because my emotions, man, I deteriorated quickly. And but thank God I have a great support group behind me. I have people that care. And if I'm, say something in our group chat, or I can show that I'm going through it or something like that, man, I immediately get people messaging me, asking me what's wrong, are you okay? And just being very understanding of what I'm going through, even though I'm like almost lashing out at them, almost not to them, or not at them, but more to them, and venting and things. And they've just been so understanding and get it, because they've been through the same shit, and that's the amazing thing about this group, and being in recovery. You just find all these people just have the same common goals, and they've gone through a lot of similar things that you've gone through. It may not be the same exact situation, but the feelings and the stress of the situation, they understand and they get it because they've gone through those things, and it's just so amazing. I'm so grateful for it today, and you really got to open your heart and your mind to it, for it to really work in your life, and you start seeing these miracles happening, and it takes work. Narcotics Anonymous is a simple, not easy program, and the difference between those two is one takes effort and one doesn't, and so, yeah, the recovery takes a lot of effort. You're going to have your ups and downs. Life's going to life on you. But in this program, they teach you all these tools, that you can use, and you get the support group and you network with people that, that reach out and truly care about you, and your well-being, and it's just an amazing feeling, and without that, I would not have made it at all, but I did, I stayed strong. I continued to, didn't use no matter what, I made it through that week. And and even still I'm struggling because I still have to be out of here in the next week, and I was really kind of hoping that I had another month because I want to get a car. And that's really, work's really starting to pick up for me. Money's starting to show up. I'm getting a pretty big paycheck this Friday, tomorrow, and then I get another big paycheck the next week after that. And depending on how well I do in sales for the rest of the week and the beginning of next week, I should have another big paycheck as well. So
thank you for watching my podcast. If you can please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss new episodes. This is my passion project. Thank you for watching.
So, and I already got promoted to leadership at work, and what's crazy is after I had that really difficult week, I got through it and I was starting to kind of feel better about myself again. I started coming back to meetings and stayed in service, even though I almost pulled myself out, but I stayed in service and I continued going to meetings. And then on my way to work one day, I get off the bus and there's a, park bench sitting there and I see these clothes on there and I see some nice dress pants, and I'm thinking in my head, oh, hey, those look nice. I wonder if they're, good enough to wash and maybe use myself because I needed some work pants. And when I picked them up, man, this folded up piece of foil fell out right in front of me, right in front of my feet, and I just felt my heart sink, and I picked it up and sure shit, had a big old chunk of fentanyl on it. And man, I felt myself immediately get emotional, and at first I stuck it in my pocket and I found myself having these thoughts, of how can I use this without anybody knowing? Excuse me. How can I use this without anybody knowing? And immediately I felt guilty. I had this guilt come over me, like, what are you doing? I'm literally on my way to work. Like, this is not okay, so I got rid of it immediately, got it out of my possession. I didn't want to take any chances. Obviously I didn't want to put it on the ground because I didn't want a kid to find it, but I got rid of it safely and got to work. And what's crazy is when I got to work, it was a day after I just had this phenomenal day where I pretty much high rolled the whole office. I outsold everybody combined, and it actually ended up helping me get promoted to leadership. But when I got to work, man, everybody was cheering my name or chanting and cheering. I mean, it was surreal, and to put this in perspective, this is what the culture is kind of like at my office. It's, if you ever seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street, think of how the energy was in that office. It's exactly how it is at my work, except for the fact that we're actually a legitimate company. It's a big difference. I work for AT&T Business. And so, but the energy and the culture there is nothing like I've ever seen, except for in movies like Wolf of Wall Street. So it was just really surreal experience, and just to think that, when, an hour before that, when I found that piece of foil, if I would have went and used that, none of that would have been possible. I was literally one decision away from throwing all I've worked for down the drain, and that terrified me. But it also humbled me as well. I realized I'm not necessarily as far in my recovery that I originally had thought, but it's because of the tools and things that I've learned and people in my life that I have today that help me be aware of that, and help me, even as much as I wanted to, make the right decision in that moment, and no matter how much time you have, that doesn't really matter. You're no different than the person that has one day or hours. You're literally one decision away from being right back where they are. So yeah, you have to be mindful of that, and realize that even the earliest of addicts can help you just as much as you can help them. So that's what's so amazing about this program, though. We're all equal. It doesn't matter how much time you have. Yeah, some might have more knowledge, and experience, but and be able to project that with others and help them, is amazing. But we're all the same, and that's just the cool thing about it, but yeah, like I said, I was able to get through that, and things have been great. I'm still stressed, like I said, I have to find a place to live by next week. I do have some options. I'm going to try to get into another sober living so that way I can still not have to pay rent for one more month. So that way I can get the car that I want. Because right now I'm almost being forced. I might have to just go get a motorcycle because it's cheaper. I can get a better quality bike, for a lower amount of money versus a car. And it'll be cheaper on gas, but it's not quite as practical, especially for my job, because there's times where we do car rides. So it'd be nice if I had a car being a leader now. that I could give people a ride, to our locations that we need to go, to our territories and things. So motorcycle wouldn't be able to do that, but I would still be able to get to and from work without having to worry about leaving the house like 3 hours early to be able to get there on time in the bus. So regardless, I'm going to try to make the best decision when the time comes. I still have a little bit of time, but it's beginning to be crunch time. So I need to be proactive about that. But, everything's going great. I'm still holding a 4.0 in school with working all these hours at work. I did take today off just so I can kind of get some things taken care of. They're really, really understanding about it. I let them know I'm probably going to have to take another day off next week to get all my stuff moved, whether I go to another sober living or, worst came to worst, I could go into Airbnb for a little bit until I figure something out. But I have insurance. I need to get that paid tomorrow, so that way it's fully active, and then I can get into a sober living, hopefully. So that'll be ideal. So that way I can save up a little bit more and get the car that I want. And then in another month, then I can worry about getting my own place, which I definitely can afford, as long as I continue on with the path that I'm at work, and so it's exciting times, like I just making more money than I've ever made in my life, at this job. And, the potential is definitely there to grow. It's a training company. So they train you in the hopes that you're going to grow with the company, and you can do that very quickly. The shortest amount of time to be able to become to where I get my own office and become CEO. I can do that within a year, especially at the pace that I'm going right now. My boss right now, the CEO of the office that I'm at, she did it in like 8 months. So it's definitely possible. She says, I remind her of a lot I remind her of herself, the way how I've been developing and things at work. So I thought that was pretty cool. It felt good, so a lot of good things are happening, but life is going to life. I still have to deal with the same stresses and things that everybody else has to deal with, but I'm just grateful I get to do that with a clear mind today, and with an amazing support group of people behind me, that helps give me these options that I have today, and so it's just such an amazing thing, and I'm so grateful. So, but with that, I'll cut it short today. You guys go out there and kill it. I know I'm going to. Wagz out.
Don't be afraid to call for help at 1-800-662-HELP.